spirit of a quicker meeting, we do have something that's really important to us as elders, as we've been discussing, particularly in the realm of how we shepherd the flock during this time of the COVID in particular. It's really shown a lot of, I think, kinks in the way that we've historically done things. So we've just asked the question, and we've been asking the question for a long time, but how do we effectively shepherd the flock that God has given us? How do we faithfully work as under-shepherds under King Jesus to love those in our care? And so with that, Gabe is going to be coming up with a brief presentation about the parish model that we've been discussing to better facilitate this. So Gabe, you want to come up?
Matt says brief because this took about an hour and a half when we did the community group leaders session, and he knows a lot of people are hungry. So let's see if I can control this up here. All right, one behind. I'm going to try to cover this in probably 10 minutes or so and keep it as concise as I can. As Matt alluded to, the purpose of this is to just answer the question of how do we shepherd the body well, and how do we kind of facilitate discipleship. So if you kind of look at the purposes here, Brian has talked about this, I think, the last 2 members' meetings. This has been the conversation for the elders, that our goal, our heart's desire for the church is to see every member in a form of weekly discipleship. And so as we're going to get into this, you're going to see that we think community groups and triads are one of the best ways to facilitate this. And really what we're wrestling with here, and I'm not going to go read this because we've actually covered this in a couple sermons recently, but we're really wrestling with the question of, if you read Acts 2, where it's talking about how they were living life day to day, sharing everything together, finding all things in common, devoting themselves to teaching and praying and everything else, we're really trying to answer the question of, we don't live in first century AD Jerusalem with everyone clustered together, right? We live in 21st century United States, in Portland, Oregon, with people scattered all over the place and working all over the place and going to school all over the place. So we want to ask the question of, how do we live intentionally trying to capture the spirit of that Acts 2 lifestyle, but understanding the realities of the life that we all kind of live and face today. So one of the ways we do that is to try to facilitate weekly discipleship. Another area that we want to see this we're calling it the parish model, is to encourage a framework for counseling. So this could be helping couples get into marriage counseling when that's something that's necessary. It could be someone with trauma counseling, could be financial assistance, right? So being helping create budgets and work through those. Or it could be something more serious, like if there are situations of sexual abuse or physical abuse. But being intentional around a framework of counseling. The next is, I think we've all been in a community group or in a relationship where there's someone that is, because they're an introvert, because of past trauma, because of whatever the situation, they just have a harder time connecting, becoming vulnerable, opening up. And we want to try to, the elders are using this phrase internally of no member falling through the cracks or no member left behind, right? And so the idea is that for people that are just in a place in their life where it's a little more difficult, we don't want to cast judgment, but we want to come alongside those people and pull them into a one-on-one discipling relationship with a mature Christian to try to just help them walk through their challenges and really press into Christ. We're sitting there sliding through slides, aren't we? All right. And then last is, I think we can all kind of acknowledge that as church leadership over the past number of years, one of the things that's been lacking is, I think, a connection from the elder team into more of the daily life of the body. And so we're seeking to kind of turn that around. And the phrase that Rust always uses, which is great, is the shepherds should smell like the sheep. Right, so we want to get into we want the leadership to be more involved with the members, knowing what's going on in your life, more connected with you. So that's the purpose. That's the goal that we're trying to see accomplished here. The way that we want to talk about this and want to propose to you is just thinking through this from kind of the Moses style of leadership. Skipping ahead too much, sorry. What that basically means is if we look at Exodus 18, this is the one where Moses' father-in-law comes and says, hey, you're spending all day with meetings with people. That's stupid. You're dumb. Don't do it that way. And it's just about what he says. And he says, get these other men underneath you and create an architecture where you only see the biggest issues, the biggest needs, and you've got a team of people to kind of help you manage everyone. And so that's what we're really kind of looking at here. And we're looking at community group leaders and community groups as essentially the able men that Exodus 18 talks about. Because if we want our life on life, the Acts 2 type of community living to be happening outside of Sunday, community groups are one of the best vehicles, and triads are one of the best vehicles we have to accomplish that. So we already have community groups. We already have triads. For those of you that were at the community group leaders meeting, you'll notice that this slide has changed. We actually took some of the feedback from that meeting and made some adjustments to this model. And namely, we were considering the idea of having community group leaders be deacons as a way of kind of deputizing them, if you will. And we eventually just said, you know what? This is too complicated. It doesn't actually add a whole lot. The heart of this is what actually matters. So you'll see that stripped out from this version. So real quickly here, this is kind of what we want to see happening. We want to see essentially a leadership type of touch point in a member's life, more or less every week, right? So community groups are a great way to accomplish this. And that means that if you miss community group, which you will, we all do, I miss community groups sometimes, right? But your community group leader is going to be a little more intentional about calling in and checking in on you, just making sure everything's okay, right? We want to know what's going on in your life. And then the community group leaders are going to have a hierarchy. In fact, we'll just jump ahead and show this real quick. There's going to be a hierarchy, right, where you have elder, community group leader, and community group members, right? And so there'll be certain elders will have certain community groups underneath them, and we'll kind of divide up the church, if you will, so we can have this kind of intentional model of communication and pastoral care for our members, so we can get to know you better, so we can be in your life better. And so we want to know when things are going on, maybe you've got struggles or challenges, so we can come alongside and we can pray with you and we can support you as a church, right? So we can live that Acts 2 kind of model together. And so the elders will be checking in with community group leaders on a once or twice a month basis just to see how are things going, other places we can step in. Additionally, elders will make personal contact with every member within those community groups once a quarter. So once every 3 months, there'll be a phone call, there'll be getting together for coffee, having you over for a meal. So we can develop a better relationship with the members of the body at an elder level. So you can know your elders, so you can approach us and talk to us and have that open conversation. And so our church will be a better reflection at the leadership level of the membership. And then lastly, we want to help people get into that discipleship relationship that are struggling. All right, real quick, couple of other points. We want to set up, I mentioned the counseling. I'm not going to go through all of these bullet points, but the gist is we want a counseling framework that the whole body knows about. And so whether you're someone that finds yourself falling into one of these categories, or you know someone here in the church that is also struggling, that we have a clear understanding of, in this situation, here's how we handle it. And a lot of this is prompted because if you look at the last 10 years, especially in cases of sexual abuse, many churches have been caught unawares and unprepared, and they frankly, in too many times, have responded poorly and caused damage and hurt because of that. And guess what? We don't really have a framework for that either. So we want to get ahead of this and say, but instead of just looking at that one topic, we want to look at all the different topics that counseling serves as a good place, and just build a framework. So maybe you find yourself in financial difficulty, right? You can go, oh, hey, look, this is how our church handles that, and we've got Ron and Aletha who have been through advanced Dave Ramsey courses and would love to get together with you and help you walk through that. Or, it's marriage counseling, it's personal counseling, it's whatever it is. And the goal, and Russ can talk about this maybe later in the Q&A, the goal is really that as much as we can, we take the people in our body, right, that have been equipped, that have these skill sets and these tools to love and support each other in this body. So as much as we can, the goal will be to have it here. But we want a framework, and we want that framework to be public so that maybe you're afraid to have a conversation within your community group, but there is a published protocol where this is how I can handle this. I'm going to rip through this real quick, and then we can answer more questions in the Q&A section. So that's kind of the counseling. So what do we need in order to accomplish this vision, this idea that we want to see people living kind of life together intentionally and have a framework for supporting you and ultimately pushing everyone to Jesus, to find your hope in Jesus throughout whatever the circumstance, whatever the challenge, whatever the difficulty. We need a better process for getting people into community groups and triads. So right now, again, I think most people have done a pretty good job just because our body tends to reach out and be very relational. But there are people, some of you in this room that have emailed me, that are not in triads or not in community groups yet. And we're aware of that, and we're going to work on it. So we want a public process and structure, a person that's accountable for this, that when someone comes and visits, that when someone is a part of the church, that we have a way to bring you into this. Now, in our Q&A the other night with the community group leaders and deacons and elders, someone asked the question of, is this only for members? And specifically, you've got people coming to this church, but they're not yet members. And the answer is yes. This is for anyone who calls this church your home, regardless of your status. We want you. We consider you a part of the body, whether you're in the membership or not. So this counts for all of you who come to this church. And then if we look at this, we're not going to go try to change community groups. We're not going to try to go change triads right now. But one of the things that we've talked about and looked at is this idea that when you have people that maybe don't know each other, aren't as connected as well, it's beneficial and helpful to them to the idea of opening up and becoming vulnerable and sharing life together when they can step into situations where people are already doing that. And one of the strengths of our church is a lot of relationship and community that already exists today. So we'd like to see, where possible, us being able to take several people that are in close relationship already, that are already sharing that life on life, and form community groups out of those relationships and bring other people into that dynamic to help enter in. And that means that you might see more and more community groups and triads made up of the same people, right? Because the more you're sharing life together during the week, the more you have an opportunity to be in each other's life, to know what's going on, to encourage each other and push each other forward. We need a list of those who can disciple. We need a counseling framework built out. And we want to see more leadership from the elders and community group leaders into areas of kind of the training for community group leaders and even insights into triads. So for instance, in your triad, you might be doing really well at going deep, or you might just get together and talk about how the week's going. And that's good. There's benefits to that. But we want to press in. We want to know, we want questions being asked like, where were you putting your affections and your hopes that wasn't Jesus this week? Because every one of us does those things. And part of our discipleship is being able to see and understand and realize those things and encourage each other lovingly to refocus our affections, to refocus our hope on Christ. So a little more leadership. So that's the quick run through. There's a lot of thought behind kind of a lot of these points, and in the Q&A we can take your questions, but that's the quick run through of kind of what we're hoping to see.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gabe. As we said, there's some Q&A time at the end, so if you have questions about all that, I know that was a lot to absorb. It is kind of informational only, but we wanted to present that because it's probably the biggest thing that we've been working on lately, because we recognize it's probably the biggest need within our body is that we work on intentionality in the body life aspects, especially as Gabe and I think Matt alluded to, the fact that COVID is happening has really shown us some of the weaknesses within that. So one more informational before we move into Q&A, and then we'll pass the ballots out as well. I think a lot of you probably are in the know about this, but Zrest gave a brief update when we weren't able to meet in front of his devotional. Just wanted to speak to the pastor search process and what the kind of the update from the elders on that. So we're meeting, we were praying, we were talking a lot about what comes next, what are we doing. The big question was, do we look internally in our own body, or do we look externally as we think about trying to locate a staff pastor? And we felt this desire of we need to look internally. And so then we brought Zrest, we had the Q&A session. We were kind of prayerfully approaching what would it look like for Zrest to step into this staff pastor role. And in particular, this was a pastor role that was really centered around kind of his teaching idea, right? And our next elder meeting after the Q&A, really appreciated Mr. Zrest here and his humility, his internal recognition of what was going on in his own heart and mind. Just was really humble and came to the elder team and said, I don't feel like this position is really suited to me and to the strengths, and was really honest with us. And the more the conversation evolved, the more we realized Zrest's heartbeat and his desire is to be a pastor, a community-type pastor, to love people, to work one-on-one. It's really this whole idea that we just talked about with this parish model, and that idea of what we need, this point person to execute this idea of this parish model and make this happen within our body. This is who we're putting forward for this type of role, because we think that Zrest can make this happen within our body. So in the meantime, as we've thought about that, his recommendation, as well as the heartbeat of the elders, is that as we look toward, we desire to look for another staff pastor also, a staff pastor for teaching and preaching, to lead that ministry of the church. And our heartbeat is that we would look externally from our body. And so that means that we start looking for candidates. We start a pastor search process. It's probably going to take us a while to get to that point. In the meantime, we'll continue to lead the church as a plurality here. We've got, Zrest that we're putting forward for this community body life pastor role. He's obviously willing to preach and has done a wonderful job in helping kind of fill the gaps these last few months. But we just wanted to welcome you guys into that conversation and to recognize that that's kind of what's going on right now. The more that we think about our body, how to lead our body, the size of our body, we feel that having two full-time staff pastors is a good move to serve our church well. So with that, I'll invite some of the other elders up to help with the Q&A aspects here. We've got to get somebody else here. Yeah, James, thank you, sir. If you have questions for Alan or Dan as well, you feel free to call them out. Yes, I'll let Gabe speak to the budget side of that aspect here, because that was something that came up in the midst of that as well, and I'm sure there might be questions about that. If we'll try to head those off.
Yeah, so we proposed a budget, which we're actually going to ask you to vote on today, and in there we had a full-time pastor and a part-time pastor. So as we started having the conversation internally as an elder team over Matt taking a full-time role while also seeking another full-time pastor, one of the things we did internally was go back to the budget. And the short answer, we can get into more numbers if you want, but the short answer, two things happened. One, giving for 2020 was greater than what we forecast in this year's budget and what we spent by $30,000. So we have a surplus coming from 2020, and our goal was to forecast flat to 2020. So we have some extra money. The other is we forecast a full-time role and a part-time role for the full calendar year. And because of the fact that we are not going to have either position starting till almost Q2 at the earliest, I think it's fair to say that a full-time preaching pastor is probably months away at this point, unless God just moves and catches everyone off guard. So we're almost looking at probably half a year of not having paid a full-time pastor for the teaching position. and we're several months into not paying anyone for the part-time position. So all that to say that when you take, for this calendar year's budget, when you take the lag into effect, we're essentially able to have 2 full-time pastors and stay budget neutral to what we had put in the budget.
All right, so if we can go ahead and distribute the ballots amidst the body here. We will start a Q&A here. There's 2 items that we're voting on today on these ballots, and hopefully we'll have time to get them gathered up and sent in. But if you do have questions pertaining to the vote, this is why we waited until now to distribute the ballots. So the 2 items we're voting on are bringing Matt Zrust on as the Body Life pastor for the Gathering Church, and the other is to approve the 2021 budget. Again, we presented that budget back at the December meeting. We just spoke to how pastor search would be affecting that, and this is just simply a vote to approve that. But if there are any questions or answers, we'll have a microphone roaming the audience here. So, Mr. Winslow. Do we have a micro? Oh, there we go. Thank you, Caden. We'll check the mic here. Audio. There we go.
So we're approving Matt for a pastor, and that's for a full-time position, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And as of, because Gabe mentioned it wasn't going to be basically till Q2, so when are we approving him as of?
So for Zrust, he has to give notice to Western, so it'd be March 8th, so he would slide in a little bit towards the end of Q1. But
Okay.
March 8th would be his first full-time day with the church.
Okay, thank you.
Reminder, if you're joining us online, you can vote to these 2 by texting Leanne, 971-506-2527. Yes, and or if you have questions, you can send those in as well. Any other questions? The parish model questions, overall questions? Nick?
So I think I can pretty much gather what you mean by parish model just by saying how the elders are going to be more intentional, and then with getting together with community groups and having community groups, kind of being the thrust of what body life looks like. But when you say parish model, so I think I get the idea. But what would be just like, hey, here's my or either one of your definitions of what you mean when you say parish model, because we don't have that old of a tradition where we actually use those terms in our current congregation. So what is that? What would your definition of parish model be?
Yeah, 2 things on that. One, I think just kind of the way that we mean it structurally amidst the team is that it's a net, if you will. It's kind of a network, and it's meant to prevent anyone from slipping through the cracks. It's meant to have that ongoing discipleship and intentional structure that speaks into their lives. There's a beautiful, I don't remember who spoke to this, but there's this beautiful video that Dan's shared with the whole elder team called Godspeed. You can check it out. It's online, livegodspeed.com. And it follows this guy who's a pastor who moves to Scotland, and he spends his time, he recognizes that he needs to be walking amidst this Scottish parish and like developing these relationships, and how God moves a lot slower sometimes than what's thought. And you have to move at this slow speed to connect and to spend the time to get to know people relationally. And so it's trying to bring that, to Gabe's point, we don't live in Scotland where we're walking around and life is really slow in this Scottish parish. We live in modern Portland, Oregon. We're all extremely busy people. So how do we create a network that works within that kind of life structure? And it's creating some intentionality in a network of people to know what are the roles and responsibilities to make this thing happen, and trying to formalize that a little bit. It was essentially all that we're doing. Anybody else want to add to that? Does that make sense? Thank you, Nick. Over here, Beth.
I was
Oh,
handed
Justin,
the mic.
sorry.
I guess I'm next, and then Beth is after me. Just curious, who comprises the pastoral search committee at this point in time? Has that been formally defined, or is it yet to formally be defined?
Yeah, the bylaws, I don't know if this is the way the bylaws were intended or not. There's a lot of that kind of like, what do the bylaws mean when it says this or that? In particular, in the bylaws, there's something that says that the elders will constitute the pulpit committee. And so I don't know if that means that we're the ones who preach, if there's not a lead pastor, as the bylaws call it, or if it means that we're the search committee. But for all intents and purposes right now, the elders are that committee. I think there's desire for the elders to get feedback and potentially to include some other members in that process as well. So if you are interested, we certainly are interested in any leads or any opinions or anything that any members would like to suggest to the elder team. And depending on elder talks, if anyone is interested in helping in a more formal way, I think there may be some interest in including that as well to get some different perspectives.
The bylaws actually, believe it or not, so every time we go through something as a church, we go, oh, our bylaws are messy here. They actually, voting on pastors is not a part of the bylaws for the body. So we're coming to you with Zrust for a vote because we believe that the body should be a part of those decisions and should participate with the elder team in making this. But actually, Zrust wasn't even, this vote for Zrust is not actually in the bylaws. It's something that we're doing. So kind of the same thing. It's very unclear about a pastor search, right? It's just basically, it mentions the elders in a certain sense, but doesn't really spell out a whole lot. So just our goal, just so you understand our heart, is we're trying to do things in such a way that we come to the body and pull the body into the process as much as we can. So just reiterating, Brian, if you have an interest, come talk to us and we can figure that out. Or if you have someone you think would be a good pastor fit for this, we'd love to have that conversation.
We had a question from Beth, and then I think James as well in the front.
I was just wondering regarding the parish model, in terms of the elder oversight, the community groups, and trying to touch base on a more individual level, in terms of the oversight, are you guys planning on having like curriculum that you want the community groups to use? Like, okay, this is the church-wide Bible study or discipleship book, or, okay, for triads, here's a list of like the 3 options you have this quarter or something like that. Is it going to be that specific, or is it more of like a conversation and a phone call and like, just wondering about that.
Yeah, that's great. So part of the conversation since we started community groups really has been, and triads, is how formal versus informal we make things. And just culturally, our church has always really pushed against the formal aspects of it. So formally saying, we're going through this series. We've kind of given recommendations, and I think we're probably going to continue in that direction. But what we're doing with the parish model is, particularly with the leaders, the community group leaders, there's going to be a lot more elder community group leader connection, and then facilitating more sort of teaching and training events, not just from us as an elder team, but from outside sources. So hopefully connecting with Western Seminary more, with whatever topic it is that we're discussing, if it's counseling, if it's marriage issues, if it's ministering to a particular demographic. We really want to try to equip everybody as well as we can from as many good sources as we can, but nothing super formal just yet. However, on that note, as I think I mentioned during the Q&A on the night when I was doing the Q&A for the pastoral role, Gay Garfield's done such a wonderful job in demonstrating what a formal commitment to one particular Bible study can be for all the women in the church. I know so many women who've just benefited enormously from that. So that's, for me personally, I think for us as an elder team, that's really caused us to kind of be like, God, we really need to press into what would it look like to get a curriculum to give our triads to go through. So we're floating that around a lot as well. That's a big part of the conversation piece. Did that answer, Beth? Pretty good? Cool.
So in the parish model, each of the different elders are going to be in contact with different community groups, leaders under them. what would distinguish your role, Matt, from the others as the elder for community life?
Primarily the development of curriculum and then being in connection with the guys. So I would be doing a bunch of the teaching. Again, that's to clarify the pastor of community life versus the pastor of preaching and teaching. Preaching and teaching is largely Sunday service oriented, right? Largely Sunday service oriented and toward the particular ministry of preaching. When we do the pastoral internship, as we develop that, the person who does most of the preaching teaching on a Sunday morning is just more dedicated to that kind of thing. The body life pastor is more dedicated to not just one-on-one sort of stuff, though I will be more involved in that way, but also for the development of curriculum, the teaching of classes, and just by and large having more oversight, sort of being able to tell the elders, hey, this could maybe a couple of you guys go over there that Sunday and just, pray over the group or just be a presence, or they haven't had an elder over there for a while. Again, this is kind of new territory for us, so we just know there's going to be a little bit of kind of stumbling in the dark and tripping over a few things a couple of times, but that's sort of the distinction, I guess, between the two.
And I think if you think about it this way, that if I'm your elder kind of within your community group, I will be seeking out relationship with the people in those communities, right? So you'll be hearing from me. You'll also be hearing from Russ, as the guy who's leading kind of the overall model and stuff. So you'll have it's more about having accountability and relationship, right? And if you think about it, with all of us at the moment being lay elders, right? If we don't have intentionality around the church and setting up some framework, it's going to be really hard for us to make sure everyone is getting touched on a regular basis. But if we have certain elders and then community groups and then the members under them or the people under them, we know that that's who we're going to be focusing our relationship time on, right? Then it allows us to kind of make sure people aren't falling through the cracks.
So in our triads, if we have our own book that we're working through, that we can choose to do our own workbook or whatever, we don't have to go by what all the other triads are doing?
Yeah, if you guys are going through something that's causing your group to thrive, like if you think you guys are doing great in what you have, it's awesome. That's wonderful. What we found with a lot of triads in particular, sometimes community groups, is that there's a struggle to figure out what to go through. And so there has been a consistent ask for, hey, could you provide some resources that we could be going through as a group? So yeah, that's the only reason that we bring it up like that. Eleni.
So how does that work with non-members then? Because you were saying kind of whoever's just coming to church in the body, how is that? Because then they're connected into a community group that that okay, there's still somebody we're investing in. Like, how does that work with non-members kind of keeping track of who's a part of us, I guess? I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, in terms of, I think we always want to encourage membership. So I think that's, because it's just easier, right? Because we have a directory that your names go in and all the rest. And most of the people who've attended for a long time have become members, thankfully. So for one thing, I'd always encourage, hey, if you do call this your church body, you should really seriously consider membership. It's a very important part of our philosophy of ministry. It's important how we run as a church. And historically, it's been an important part of how the church has always functioned. Not just our church, but the church universal. In terms of people who are non-members in groups, it's part of that not that accountability, but that connectivity piece where the elders are going to be communicating with the community group leaders and say, hey, how's so-and-so doing? Have you talked to them about membership in a while? I'd really like to encourage you to maybe approach them and talk with them about it. Or if they want to sit down and have coffee with an elder and they just are a little timid, they don't want to talk to me, just open that up for them, say hey, I can be there with you too, and open the door to that kind of a conversation.
I think the other aspect of that, especially with people that are not members, is they can become invisible if we're not careful, right? And so this idea of Matt as the point person for the parish model in particular, one of the aspects of that is that we want to have a published process for getting people into community groups, into triads, right? So some churches have an alpha model, right, where it's you come in and you go right into the alpha model or something like that. We want to have okay, great. you see someone, like, let's talk to them, let's connect them with Matt, let's find a community group that works for them, let's get them into that. And we want a more formal process for how we identify someone that comes in and we quickly get them into body life. And the membership part can come as they are here and fellowshipping with us and stuff. But a lot of it's about, let's help those people get into relationship as quick as we can. And for some members of our church, it's like, man, the first week I was here, that happened. For other people, it took them 6 months, right? And so we want to kind of make it so everyone has that first week. We pull them in. So that's going to be about kind of a published process so everyone knows. So if you see someone new that we miss, you can just go talk to them and say, oh, great, here, let me introduce you to Matt, and let's help you get into that process.
Got a question here real quick. This is from Dory Best, our beloved Dory Best. We hope that the body at large will be invited to conferences and classes. We know what a huge boost to our spiritual life it was to go to conferences when Merv was on the elder team. We need it now more than ever. More of the congregation needs that as well. Do you see this as an option? In short, Dory, yes. So that's part of the conferences, or sorry, the classes and the sort of teaching aspect of the parish model in particular. We want to see people, we had a thing for a long time where people who were leading worship would go to like the Sing conference and things like that. Johnny's up there. I know John, he gave a thumbs up, thought it was great. And it was enormously beneficial to everybody who went. And yeah, I absolutely hope, right now the budget's a little funny because again, there's not a lot of conferences happening, but for all of us as elders, we would love to see as much equipping as we could have, especially for specialized areas like CCF's conference on counseling, ACBC courses on counseling, different conferences that deal with missions, things are sending for foreign mission opportunities, worship service, mercy ministries, whatever. There's so many rich resources out there that we as a church can avail ourselves of. So yeah, we would love to see more of that happen. And come here Friday night, March 5th, for Voice of the Martyrs. And you will be encouraged and equipped as well.
Matt, so a follow-up on that. Is the idea that the church would help sponsor those, or the church would just encourage that? And if so, I mean, I don't remember seeing a line item for sending members to conferences.
That's why I was saying it's a bit tough right now as far as like how where it would come from right now, the vision, because there's no conferences going on and we haven't really budgeted for it. But there is a budget line item for it. It's not as enormous as it used to be. And again, as we've kind of been working through the parish model, this is one piece where we've asked. Local conferences are great. I know before we used to send the elders on, God, we'd probably go to 3 conferences a year. We'd be gone for, like 4 nights in a hotel or whatever else. We'd really like to, personally, this is just me speaking as thinking in terms of the community, I'd like to see it dispersed more among the congregation for more localized trainings and classes. There's a ton of stuff that's going on locally, conferences and everything else. If there's a particular conference that we think would be really awesome and edifying, I would love to see us as a church cover those things. I have no authority to do that right now. But our line item is $6,000. So we have $6,000 set aside for it, which doesn't cover a ton. But again, if we do more localized things, it will cover a significant amount more. Yeah. Do you have anything else with that, Nick? Yeah.
Is it me next? Is this on? Okay.
Rebecca, yeah.
I had a question about, well, one, is there any discussion about childcare on Sundays for the kids? You spoke to wanting everybody here, and one of the reasons why we've loved house church during this season is just because of our little people. And so I wondered, is there discussion about that? Also, is there a way that we could have an online sign up available to anybody? So people who aren't members can sign up? Because one of the elders told me, we're doing masks in part because we want to be a good testimony or witness to other people, but people can't even sign up to come. So I felt a little like, well, maybe that's something we can consider. And we just don't know how long this is going to be. I wondered if you could speak a little more to, is there going to be any change in how we're doing church? And, for those of us who might find that fellowship on a Sunday morning without masks, where our kids, we're in a home more comfortable, is that like, are you blessing that? Because there are a lot of people who don't come on Sundays right now, and they're still a part of our church. And I just want to hear a little bit more, I guess, about that.
In short, we haven't talked about childcare stuff because of the COVID restrictions, largely. That just hasn't come to the conversation yet. But it's going to be coming increasingly in our conversation as restrictions lift and everything. As to the second part of the question, revolving around, sorry, I'm spacing with the second part. Registration. Yeah, that's been a huge problem, and I haven't even thought of like any avenues for that. But do you have anything on that, Gabe? Sorry.
That link is actually open to anyone. You don't have to be a member. So if you share, or you can register other people for them, so they don't even have to. So if you know someone that wants to come, just put them. You can just do it under your when you're setting yourself up. If you can send it to them. Okay, I just wondered if we could have it open. Is it posted on the website? We could post it on the website. Yeah, we could do that. Oh. On the website? Yeah, we could post it on the website though. Well, it'll be really easy for us to put those links on the website, and then anyone could find it. We'll get to you guys in a second. I think. Did that answer all your questions, Rebecca? Yeah, I mean, our desire is to have everyone here. That's our desire. But we also are trying to walk in grace and love with people that just that essentially aren't going to come, right? So desire is to have everyone here, but we're trying to walk in grace and love for those that feel like they can't come. And trying to shepherd and embrace kind of every member of the body, regardless of where you're at right now.
I was just wondering, in regards to like the parish model with discipleship, how that'll look for our members who are out of country in India or elsewhere.
Yeah, so I think I'll answer this first, and one of the other guys can join in. I think for people that are members but are in different communities, it's different, right? So our relationship with them is going to be to stay in touch, to see how they're doing, so we can pray for them. The goal for them, though, is to see them in local discipling relationships in their communities and where they're at. And then to stay a part of their life so we can pray for them, so we can counsel them, push them to Jesus as needed.
One thing that Severin was so good at this and is so good at this was just maintaining contact, particularly with our missionaries, and we need to up our game on that. So we've maintained contact, but it hasn't been great. So that's the part of this whole thing with maintaining community connectivity and everything else, and discipling relationships, is to make sure that those lines of communication are more regular, more open. Michaela Jackson.
I just had a question as far as like community group leader qualifications. I'm just wondering if there's already something in place, or if if you're planning on putting something in place for like what it takes to be a community group leader, besides my house is big enough. But like, because I wasn't sure, like, as far as like thinking about like moving into the neighborhoods more and like expanding our community groups so we can make more community groups, etc. Like, is there like you need to be a Christian for 10 years first, or like, I don't know, some sort of like curriculum, or not curriculum, you know what I mean? Like qualification that you're looking for in order to like become community group leaders?
I think one thing would be, we haven't talked about this, but I think membership is one thing. I think you'd have to be a member to be a leader of a community group. Your house has to be at least 500 square feet. So that's, I mean, they do it in India. You would be shocked at how many people you can fit in 500 square feet. So So that's on that note. The conversation behind what Gabe had mentioned in his presentation about taking out the piece of making community group leaders deacons was part of what we were thinking of putting in place to make some sort of a standard to be like, hey, if you're a community group leader, you qualify as a deacon, you hold to these certain things, and you're in this much alignment with the church's doctrine and practice. We took that out because of all this sort of the complications and things that were involved with it, so we're still kind of in process talking about that, but we would like to see more things in place as far as qualifications go for the community group leaders.
I was just wondering, is there any way to have some kind of sign for registration outside that would like tell people where to register if they're like walking down the street? Because we have had people in the past just walk upon the church and come in, or like hadn't been signed up before and they're just really confused with the process. For instance, back in the day before COVID, Amadeus, he just stumbled upon the church and he's like, oh, this looks cool. There are plenty of people, especially now where there are churches that are closed down everywhere. And it would be a better opportunity to try to bring people in, because sometimes they'll just come to the front and be like, what is going on? Just maybe somewhere like on the sign that says register and where to register, because it can be confusing for new people.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We had a sign up about the live stream. I know that we put up when we were only doing our live stream back 10 months ago, 9 months ago, whatever it was. But I think it's a wonderful idea. We'll see if we can get someone to work on that. Appreciate the suggestion. Any other question? Oh, there's a question that came on online.
Yeah, there was a question about air system and the church. Do we have filters? Can we look into updating the air system? Can windows open for circulation? The answer is yes, we actually have a lot of filtration. So these mini splits that run along the wall, there's 6 of them in the sanctuary alone. Every one of those has their own air filtration system. And we have a central air filtration system as well. So just in the auditorium, there are 7 air filters running and circulating the air throughout the service. Then a follow-up question about bringing up Awana again into discussion.
Total curveball.
Air filters in Awana.
Air filters in Awana. Oh, God. Can we bring up the idea of Awana into discussion again? Yes, we can talk about it again. We would, and again, the thing with Awana, a big part of why we didn't move forward with Awana or continue Awana was because we didn't have anybody who was really passionate and had the time to be able to front all the effort that it would take to make it happen. So if you have a passion for Awana and you do want to make it happen, and we have the backbone of tons of people who would like to help out with that, we would like to bring it into conversation again.
So forgive me if this is too soon of a question, but what is it going to look like practically for the staff pastor search? Like, are you guys going to look at job boards? Are you going to, probably not Monster, but I mean, what's that going to look like?
Yeah, we put on Craigslist. we like somebody 50 or older. Yeah, come over, meet me at Starbucks, and we'll talk. Yeah,
Non-Christian mingle, right?
Right. No, so Western Seminary's got, I mean, there's a lot, and our connections with CB Northwest and other churches, we would just be basically reaching out for our sort of circles of influence right now, primarily Western and CB Northwest. And again, like Gabe mentioned, or Brian mentioned, somebody mentioned, we would love to hear from you guys if you think of somebody that you thought, hey, maybe you should talk to this person because he's a great man. And this is just me personally. I would love to see somebody a little older come in the pulpit and be involved in Sunday ministry like that. I've always thrived best as a dude helping to support another dude. That's what I love to do. And I would love to see somebody shepherded and brought in here so that he could shepherd the flock on Sunday mornings and have a real passion for that. it doesn't have to be older, but I think that would be wonderful. So if you guys have anybody in mind or you know anyone in your circles, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I'll just say, typically, if you know someone personally or have some sort of connection that's like one chain off, there's a lot more likelihood that that's going to work out positively. However, who knows how the Lord's moving? So I think casting a very wide net is important. And so that's our goal, is to pursue all available opportunities. Frankly, we haven't had a lot of discussion about it yet, and it is maybe a little soon because I think our next meeting, which is this Tuesday, we'll be starting that process in earnest. There was a lot of back and forth and kind of this whiplash factor on figuring out what kind of role are we getting set up for Zerust and what are we doing, just to be honest. But yes, yeah, we did have a Saturday work session at Gabe's house where we had some delicious hash and spent a lot of time working on job descriptions. If that would be helpful as well, hopefully we can get those sent out, maybe with the minutes. I don't know how quickly those get processed. But are there any other questions? We have votes to report on here, Francesca?
I just wanted to say that, I brought 2 guests today. I just registered them as my household. But if somebody were to stumble along the church on a Sunday morning, we're not really going to turn them away, are they?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why we've got some folks at the doors, and we're ready to receive them and get them signed up. So, yeah. Any other last call for questions here? Fantastic. You saw one? No? All right. Well, our votes we have for bringing Matt Zerust in for the Body Life pastor. We have 52 yeses and 0 nos. So congratulations, brother. Welcome aboard. And to approve the 2021 budget, we have 51 yes votes and 0 nos. I guess that's maybe 1 abstention, but yep, so that's approved. So moved. All right, and that's all of our business today. Thank you guys for your attention here. Thank you for your just unity in the midst of this time. We love you guys. We're praying for you. And again, we welcome any feedback or especially leads that you have for Pastor as well. And with that, I'll ask Zerust to pray us out.
Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this time. We thank you so much for your church. We love you, and we entrust ourselves to you, God. We entrust this the whole of this church to you, this city, and this time. All these things, God, we just pray that you would give us, again, just a spirit of unity, of giving the benefit of the doubt, putting our best foot forward in love and trust and joy. That the unity of the Spirit, the bond of peace would knit us together in a way that we just can't ourselves, God. So guard us, guard our beloved body as we go forward today. Pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.